Max leaned back against the soft fabric of his chair, his gaze fixed on the viewport as the vastness of space stretched endlessly before him. The stars shimmered like distant lanterns, too far to touch, yet too close to ignore. His cabin was modest, yet it felt oddly homely. The survival tablets from the Aurora colonists lined the shelves, their holographic displays flickering with images of Earth. Each tablet showed a piece of the planet he longed for. Lush green forests, azure oceans, towering cityscapes, and even mundane suburban neighborhoods. These were fragments of a world he wasn't sure he would ever see again. On his desk lay a piece of the Aurora's hull, polished and smoothed from countless years drifting in space. It was a silent tribute to those who didn't survive. The officer tunic he'd been given hung neatly by the door, paired with the modified colony jumpsuits he and Ava had painstakingly adjusted to fit beneath it. It felt surreal to wear the insignia of the ISC Horizon, a ship and crew that now felt like a strange, makeshift family. Malinar had been the first to notice how seamlessly Max had started integrating into the crew. It was in the small things, the way he offered unorthodox solutions without hesitation, how he seemed to notice things others overlooked, and how he effortlessly worked alongside both organic and synthetic minds. In medical, his suggestions had helped her refine the diagnostic algorithms, catching subtleties that even Ava had missed. "He has eyes like a predator," Malinar murmured to herself once, watching Max review a set of scans with unnerving precision. She'd asked him how he managed it, and his reply had been as disarming as it was simple. "On Earth, missing small details can get you killed. It's second nature to notice." His words stayed with her. Cabo had also begun to rely on Max in ways he hadn't anticipated. When the Horizon encountered wreckage from a long-lost Kernaf freighter, it was Max who identified potential dangers among the debris. With a single suggestion to recalibrate the ship's scanners to detect chemical residues, they uncovered a volatile storage tank that could have detonated upon contact. "Sharp eyes, Max," Cabo had rumbled with approval, his ursine features softening. "You keep this up and you'll be saving us more often than Ava." Max had chuckled lightly, his humility evident. "It's just instinct, Captain. Back home, we learned quickly to err on the side of caution." Cabo noted the way Max avoided mentioning Earth explicitly. It was a puzzle the captain intended to solve, but for now, he let it rest. Trust, he knew, was earned in layers. Even Tashar had reluctantly warmed to the human's presence. While Max's earlier insight into his work had irked him, the chief science officer couldn't deny the value of having another sharp mind aboard. Their discussions often started with Tashar's skepticism and ended with Max proposing solutions that bordered on brilliance. "Fine," Tashar had said one afternoon, his vulpine tail flicking in mild irritation. "Your idea works. But next time, perhaps consider consulting me before upending months of calculations." "I did consult you," Max replied with a grin, his tone teasing. "I just didn't wait for your approval." Tashar huffed, but there was a hint of a smile hidden beneath his frustration. Max's relationship with Maruk had also shifted. The head of security still maintained a wary edge, but their tactical discussions had grown into something resembling camaraderie. Maruk enjoyed challenging Max with increasingly complex combat scenarios, and to his surprise, Max consistently provided solutions that left even Ava impressed. "Where did you learn this?" Maruk asked after one particularly intricate simulation. Max shrugged. "It's not just about training. It's about understanding your enemy, your environment, and your resources. Humans call it survival instinct." Maruk nodded, his respect for the young human growing. "Keep working on that. You're proving yourself useful." Max smiled faintly. "Working on something already. It's complicated." Engineering was where Max found both frustration and amusement. Jifian Tech's meticulous nature clashed with his improvisational approach, but their unlikely partnership had become one of mutual respect. "Max!" Jifian groaned as he bypassed a drone's faulty circuit board with a salvaged component. "You're going to give me an aneurysm with these shortcuts." "They're not shortcuts," Max replied, smirking. "They're creative solutions." Jifian's four arms crossed skeptically. "Your solutions defy all logic." "Exactly," Max said, tapping the drone, which hummed to life. "And yet, they work." The Cordian engineer couldn't help but laugh. My kin would be horrified, but you're not half bad, human. Max chuckled and hums. Hey, Xiphion, can you help me brainstorm something? I don't know if I can pull something off alone, he says, pulling out his survival tablet. But despite his growing role and acceptance among the crew, Max often found himself drawn to the observation rooms, staring out into the infinite expanse of stars. Tonight was no different. He barely noticed Malinar's presence until she spoke softly. You've been quiet lately. Max glanced at her, offering a faint smile. Just thinking. She stepped closer, her empathic senses brushing against the surface of his emotions. There was a storm beneath the calm, a mix of hope, regret, and something she couldn't quite place. What's on your mind? She asked gently. Max hesitated, then sighed. I used to look down on people. Back home, I thought I was better than most because things came easy to me. But now I don't even know if my home still exists, or if humanity is still out there. Malinar's heart ached at the vulnerability in his voice. Max, you've survived against impossible odds. That says more about your people than words ever could. He nodded slowly, his gaze returning to the stars. I just hope I'm not the last. That somewhere out there someone's looking up at these same stars and thinking the same thing. You're not alone anymore, Malinar said firmly. We're here, Max, and we won't stop until we find the answers you need. For the first time in days, Max's smile reached his eyes. Thanks, Malinar. That means more than you know. And as they stood together, gazing into the void, Max allowed himself a flicker of hope. Somewhere out there, humanity's story wasn't over yet. The next day, in the briefing room aboard the ISC Horizon was tense but focused, the hum of the ship's systems barely audible over the soft murmurs of the senior staff. Captain Cabo Zome sat at the head of the table, his ursine features calm but his deep-set eyes sharp with curiosity. Beside him, Maruk Kion's posture was rigid, his arms crossed in quiet defiance. Malinar sat further down, her expression carefully neutral, though her empathic senses buzzed with the emotions in the room. Max Williams stood near the holographic display table, a schematic glowing in the air before him. His fingers hovered over the interface as he explained his proposal to the assembled crew. This is my idea, Max began, gesturing to the projected blueprint. A drone system specifically designed for defensive operations during boarding actions. The drones would carry the heavy shields currently used by the Authiadans, freeing them to wield heavier weapons and focus on counteroffensives. The room was silent for a moment, save for the soft whirring of Ava's holographic projector as the AI appeared next to Max. Her translucent figure studied the blueprint before turning her attention to the crew. It's a logical solution, Ava said, her tone neutral but firm. Statistical simulations indicate a significant improvement in both defensive and offensive efficiency if this system is implemented. Cabo stroked his chin thoughtfully, his claws grazing his fur. And yet, the shield is more than just a piece of equipment to my people, he said. His voice was calm but carried an undercurrent of conflict. It is a symbol of honor, a vow to protect those behind us. To hand that responsibility to a machine feels wrong. Maruk nodded in agreement, his expression hard. The shield is sacred to the Authiadan. It represents our strength and our duty. I cannot surrender that, even for efficiency. Max took a deep breath, his hands clasping behind his back as he faced the two Authiadans. I understand, he said sincerely. The shield is more than a tool. It's a part of your identity. But hear me out. He tapped the interface, and the schematic shifted to a simulation of a boarding action. The holographic display showed Authiadan warriors in the front line, their movements slowed by the heavy shields. Behind them, other species struggled to find effective firing positions. In the last boarding action with the Kernaf, Max explained, I noticed that your front line is crucial for protecting the crew, but the shields limit your mobility and prevent you from using your full strength to countercharge. If the shields are carried by drones instead, you'd be free to fight at full capacity while the drones maintain the defensive line for the rest of us. Tashar Wolp leaned forward, his vulpine features skeptical but intrigued. It's an interesting idea, he admitted, but we don't have the raw materials to fabricate the necessary parts. The resources required for drone construction are not something we have in abundance. Zildjian Tech, the ship's chief engineer and Shifion's father, nodded in agreement. The boy is clever, but cleverness won't conjure materials out of thin air. Max gave a small, knowing smile. I've already considered that. We don't have the materials, at least not in the form you're thinking of. But we do have my cryopod. The room went still. You want to dismantle your cryopod? Malinar asked softly, her empathic senses picking up the faint turmoil in Max's emotions. Max nodded. It's made of advanced alloys, some of which are rare even by your standards. Xifian and I have been working on a plan to break it down and smelt the components into usable materials. It's not easy, but it's possible. Zildjian tilted his head, considering. You'd sacrifice the pod? Your only physical link to your past? Max's gaze didn't waver. The pod did its job. It saved my life. Now it can help save others. Maruk frowned, his arms tightening across his chest. I still can't agree with this. The shield is a symbol of protection. To give that duty to a machine is to dishonor our ancestors. Max met Maruk's eyes, his voice steady but laced with quiet intensity. I've studied your culture, Maruk. The shield isn't just about protection. It's about ensuring the safety of those who can't defend themselves. The drones won't replace the Uthyadan warriors. They'll enhance them. The shields will still defend the crew, but you'll be free to strike with full force and end any threat faster. Isn't that the ultimate goal of your honor code? Maruk opened his mouth to counter but hesitated. Cabo's deep voice broke the silence. He has a point, the captain said, his tone thoughtful. Our honor is tied to the protection of the ship and its crew. If this system allows us to do that more effectively, then perhaps it's worth considering. Maruk's jaw tightened, but he gave a reluctant nod. I'll think about it. Malinar watched Max closely, sensing the subtle mix of resolve and uncertainty in his emotions. You're sure about this? She asked. Max turned to her, his expression softening. I'm sure. This is my way of contributing. I owe this crew my life, and I'll do whatever it takes to keep everyone safe. Cabo leaned back in his chair, his gaze sweeping over the room. We'll take this under serious consideration. Zildjian, work with Max and Xifian to see if the materials from the cryopod can be repurposed. Ava, run additional simulations on the effectiveness of the proposed system. And Maruk, he paused, his expression softening. Think about what Max said. Honor isn't diminished by adapting, it's strengthened. The meeting ended, and the crew began to disperse. As Max turned to leave, Malinar approached him, her voice low. You're carrying a lot on your shoulders, she said. Max gave her a small smile. I guess I am, but it's worth it. Her empathic senses caught the flicker of something deeper, an attachment he was struggling to articulate. She placed a gentle hand on his arm. You don't have to carry it alone. Max hesitated, then nodded. Thanks, Malinar. That means a lot. As she watched him leave, Malinar couldn't help but feel a growing admiration for the young human who had already given so much, and was willing to give even more. Chapter 12, Small Steps. The engineering bay echoed with the steady clink of tools and the hum of machinery as Max Williams and Xifian Tech worked with near-surgical precision. Pieces of the cryopod, once Max's impenetrable coffin in the cold void, lay dismantled on a large workbench. Each component was carefully catalogued under the watchful gaze of Zildjian Tech, the chief engineer. That alloy is extraordinary, Zildjian muttered, holding up a fragment of the cryopod's outer shell. The piece gleamed with an iridescent sheen under the bay's harsh lights. Strong, lightweight, resistant to energy weapons. Your people were clearly advanced. Max didn't look up from his task of removing a particularly stubborn coupling. We were resourceful, he replied. Humans didn't have the luxury of otherworldly resources or ancient technologies. We had to innovate with what we had. Xifian, perched on a stool with her forearms deftly working on a micro-welder, glanced up at her father. He's not wrong. This design is efficient, elegant even. I've been taking notes. Zildjian grunted, torn between skepticism and reluctant admiration. We'll see if it lives up to its potential once we start smelting it down. Max wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, the physical effort grounding him as his mind raced with memories. Each piece of the cryopod he removed felt like a piece of his past being stripped away. It was necessary, but it wasn't easy. Later that evening, Max found himself in the observation room, staring out at the stars. The great void stretched endlessly before him, the pinpricks of light a reminder of how vast and indifferent the universe could be. His arms rested on the railing, his head bowed as waves of memories swept over him. He thought of his parents, Evelyn and Adrian, his mother's gentle voice as she explained the intricacies of biochemistry to him when he was just a child, his father's booming laugh and the way he'd patiently answer Max's endless questions about physics. And then there was Marie. Marie with her fiery passion and razor-sharp wit. Marie who had somehow seen past his arrogance and broken through his defenses. She had been a force of nature, challenging him, grounding him, and teaching him how to truly connect with others. Max's chest tightened as he remembered her laugh, her determined gaze, the way she'd argue with him until they both ended up laughing. He'd never told her how he felt, and now he never would. He barely noticed the sound of the observation room door sliding open, but he felt the presence before he saw her. "Max." Malinar's voice was soft, a gentle hum of concern. He didn't turn around. "How did you know I was here?" She stepped closer, her empathic senses reaching out to the grief and longing radiating from him. "I felt it," she said simply. He let out a short laugh, humorless and hollow. "Of course you did. You're always so good at that." She stood beside him, her hands resting lightly on the railing. For a while, neither of them spoke, the silence filled only by the hum of the ship and the distant light of the stars. "Do you want to talk about it?" Malinar asked gently. Max hesitated, his grip tightening on the railing. But there was something in her presence, steady, warm, unjudging, that made it easier to let the words come. He didn't turn around. "How did you know I was here?" She stepped closer, her empathic senses reaching out to the grief and longing radiating from him. "I felt it," she said simply. He let out a short laugh, humorless and hollow. "Of course you did. You're always so good at that." She stood beside him, her hands resting lightly on the railing. For a while, neither of them spoke, the silence filled only by the hum of the ship and the distant light of the stars. "Do you want to talk about it?" Malinar asked gently. Max hesitated, his grip tightening on the railing, but there was something in her presence, steady, warm, unjudging, that made it easier to let the words come. He started with his parents. "Mom and Dad were incredible people," he said softly. "Mom was religious. She believed in animism, that everything has a spirit. Dad wasn't religious at all, but they both loved science. They taught me that the universe is vast and beautiful, even if it's cruel." Malinar nodded, remembering the brief conversations they'd had about his mother's beliefs. "Animism," she said. "I remember you mentioning it. Your mother's faith must have been important to her." "It was," Max said, a faint smile flickering across his lips. "She used to tell me that every star, every planet, even the void itself has a soul. It sounded poetic when I was a kid. Now, I'm not sure what to believe." Malinar's gaze softened, her empathic senses brushing against the grief buried deep in his words. "And Marie?" she asked after a moment. Max stilled, his knuckles whitening on the railing. "Marie," he exhaled slowly, his voice thick with emotion. "She was everything I wasn't. Passionate, stubborn, brilliant in a way that was infuriating and amazing all at once. We clashed so much when we first met, but she never gave up on me. She broke down every wall I put up and made me see people, not just problems to solve." Malinar hesitated, then asked the question gently. "Did you love her?" Max was silent for a long time, his eyes fixed on the stars. Finally, he shook his head. "I don't know," he admitted. "I never told her. I never even let myself think about it. I was too focused on proving myself, on being the smartest person in the room. She deserved better than that." He sighed, his shoulders slumping. "She taught me how to connect with people, how to trust them. She told me that in a colony, trust and communication are the most important things. And now, he swallowed hard. Now she's gone. Everyone I ever cared about is gone. Malinar reached out, placing a hand on his arm. Her voice was soft but firm. You carry a lot of weight, Max, but you're not alone anymore. Max looked at her, his expression a mix of gratitude and sadness. You remind me of her, he said quietly. Not physically, but emotionally. Like you have the same soul in a different body. He gave a short laugh, shaking his head. That sounds like something Mom would say. Malinar hummed thoughtfully. In my beliefs, the veil connects all souls. It's possible in a way. But I'm not Marie, Max. I'm me. I know, he said, his voice steady but soft. And I'm glad you're you. For a moment, the weight of his grief felt a little lighter. The stars outside still stretched endlessly, but with Malinar beside him, the void didn't feel quite so empty. The following morning, Max woke feeling lighter, the weight of yesterday's memories no longer pressing as heavily on his chest. The talk with Malinar had given him a clarity he hadn't felt in weeks, a reminder that even in this unfamiliar galaxy, he wasn't completely alone. As he stepped into the engineering bay, the familiar hum of machinery and the faint metallic tang of heated alloy greeted him. Shiffion Tech was already there, her 4 arms moving with mechanical precision as she prepared the smelting equipment. Finally decided to show up? She teased without looking up from her work. Max smirked. It's not my fault you don't need sleep. Shiffion chuckled. 4 arms, less sleep, Cordian efficiency at its finest. You humans are at such a disadvantage. Remind me to add unfair biological advantages to my complaint log, Max quipped as he grabbed a pair of thermal gloves. Zildjian Tech stood off to the side, arms crossed, his gaze sharp as he watched Max and his daughter prepare to smelt the cryopod components. His skeptical expression hadn't changed much since the project began, but Max was starting to find it more amusing than intimidating. The first pieces of the cryopod's armored shell were fed into the smelter, glowing as they melted into a shimmering liquid alloy. Ava's holographic form flickered to life nearby, her humanoid projection watching the process with a clinical detachment. The material density is impressive, Ava commented. It will integrate well into the fabricator's resource bank. However, the next phase, constructing your shield drone, will test its structural limits. Zildjian grunted, his skepticism plain. That shield-bearing drone design is over-engineered, too heavy, too redundant, a waste of resources. Max didn't rise to the bait, keeping his focus on the smelting process. It's robust for a reason. A shield drone isn't just a tool, it's a barrier. It has to withstand sustained impact, whether from energy weapons or physical strikes. Redundancy ensures it won't fail at the worst moment. Shiffion chimed in, not missing a beat. He's right. A drone like this is meant to take punishment. If you're worried, we can run a simulation. Let's see if the design can handle something really brutal. She grinned mischievously. Like Cabo. Zildjian raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. A simulation of the captain? You'd be better off designing a tank. Or, Max said, his voice calm, you could let the data speak for itself. With a grumble, Zildjian tapped a few commands into the console, initiating the simulation. On the nearby display, a digital rendering of the drone appeared, standing firm as a simulated Authiodon, scaled to Cabo's size and strength, launched a relentless assault. The drone's shield absorbed blow after blow, its structural integrity holding at an impressive 93%. Shiffion shot her father a smug look. Looks like it's not so over-engineered after all. Zildjian muttered something under his breath but didn't argue further. Max allowed himself a small smile, satisfied but not smug. He was learning to let his work speak for itself. Later that day, Max stood outside Cabo Zoam's office, datapad in hand. He took a steadying breath before the door slid open, revealing the captain seated behind his desk. The ursine figure looked up, his imposing presence filling the room. Come in, Max, Cabo said, gesturing for him to take a seat. Max stepped inside, his posture straight, and handed over the datapad. This is the progress report on the cryopod smelting and the shield drone prototype. The material has been successfully integrated into Ava's fabricator, and we've run simulations to test the drone's durability. Results show a 93% hold rate against a simulated Althiodon of your specifications. Cabo's eyebrows lifted slightly, his expression unreadable as he scanned the report. Impressive, he said after a moment, his deep voice rumbling. You've made excellent progress. Max shifted in his seat, uncomfortable with the praise. It's just a drone, he said, downplaying the effort. Xiphion and Zildjian did most of the heavy lifting. Cabo set the datapad down and leaned forward, fixing Max with a steady gaze. When an Uthiodon of my age gives a compliment, it is not done lightly, Max. You should learn to accept it. The sincerity in Cabo's tone caught Max off guard. He nodded slowly, feeling a mix of pride and humility. Thank you, Captain. Cabo leaned back in his chair, a hint of a smile on his ursine face. You've earned it. Now, let's see if your shield drone is as effective in the field as it is in your simulations. Keep up the good work, Provisional Officer. As Max left the office, he couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. For the first time in what felt like ages, he wasn't just surviving, he was contributing, earning his place among the crew of the Horizon. The observation deck was one of Max's favorite places on the ISC horizon. Its wide, curved window offered an uninterrupted view of the stars, their light piercing through the vast emptiness of space. It was where he often came to think or escape. Tonight, the stars seemed different. Less like the cold, taunting sentinels they had been, and more like guides. Promises and warnings, he thought, not silent judges to his colony ship's fate. As he leaned against the railing, gazing out into the infinite, he wondered why this change had come. Was it the crew's gradual acceptance of him? Malinar's empathy helping him with his lingering grief? Or perhaps Cabo's subtle yet significant shift in attitude toward him? He'd started to feel like he belonged here, not just as a survivor or a curiosity, but as part of something larger. Max closed his eyes, letting the faint hum of the ship soothe his thoughts. When he opened them again, his resolve had solidified. Trust wasn't something he gave freely, but Cabo was proving worthy of it. In turn, Max felt he had to be worthy of Cabo's growing trust, a pivotal exchange, one that might shape his place aboard the Horizon. Still, a nagging curiosity bubbled to the surface. Max realized he didn't actually know what the ship's mission was beyond the vague goal of exploration. For all he understood about the Horizon's technology and systems, its actual purpose remained a mystery. "Ava!" he called, his voice cutting through the quiet of the room. The ship's AI materialized almost instantly, her holographic form flickering into existence beside him. She inclined her head politely. "Yes, Max? I've been here for almost 3 months now, and I just realized I don't actually know what the Horizon is doing out here. Care to enlighten me?" Ava's expression shifted to one of mild amusement. The Horizon is on a 6-month exploration mission to the edge of interstellar council space. This is the 8th such mission for both the ship and its crew. You were picked up in the 2nd week of this deployment. In approximately 2.5 weeks, we will dock at Akerturis Station for resupply and crew shore leave, which will last about a month. Max absorbed the information, nodding thoughtfully. "And the Interstellar Council? Do they know I'm here?" Ava hesitated for a moment before responding. "Due to our current distance from Central Council communication networks, no. However, I am cataloging all your public actions and interactions. This will serve as evidence of your peaceful nature, should the Council require assurance." Max raised an eyebrow, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Cataloging me, huh? Guess I'll just have to make sure the record is spotless. Don't want to give the Council the wrong idea." Ava returned his smile, her tone even. "That would be wise. First impressions are critical in diplomatic matters, especially with a species as unique as yours." Max chuckled softly. "You make me sound like a curiosity in a zoo." "More like an unclassified discovery," Ava replied smoothly. "One that has the potential to change the course of interstellar relations. No pressure." "None at all," Max said dryly, shaking his head. The conversation took a more serious turn when Ava added, "On another note, Captain Cabo has finalized the planetary exploration mission scheduled for next week. You will be participating as part of the science department's team." Max straightened, his curiosity piqued. I'm going down to the surface? Correct. As a provisional science officer, your role will involve environmental analysis, geological sampling, and assisting in any biological examinations deemed necessary. Max nodded slowly. Makes sense. Can you show me the planet? Ava raised a hand, and the holographic interface shifted, projecting a detailed image of the planetoid they would soon explore. The surface was a patchwork of rocky terrain, icy plains, and jagged mountain ranges, with faint indications of atmosphere and liquid reservoirs. This is planetoid GX-473, Ava explained. It is classified as a Class 4 terrestrial body, with an atmosphere similar to that of a high-altitude region on a standard garden world. Breathable for limited durations, but requiring auxiliary oxygen in most cases. Surface temperatures range from -15 to -40 degrees Celsius, with localized volcanic activity in certain regions. Early scans suggest potential for both microbial life and rare mineral deposits. Max studied the projection closely, his mind already racing with possibilities. Looks like a challenge, he said, half to himself. It will be, Ava confirmed. But based on your performance thus far, I believe you will rise to the occasion. Max glanced at her, surprised by the rare note of encouragement in her voice. Thanks, Ava. I'll do my best not to disappoint. As the hologram faded and the observation deck returned to its quiet state, Max turned back to the stars. The planetoid loomed in his mind. A new challenge, a new opportunity to prove himself, and maybe, just maybe, a step closer to finding where he truly belonged in this vast, uncharted galaxy. But first, he had a drone to finish. Chapter 13. Evolving Shields. The workshop aboard the ISC Horizon buzzed with activity, the air thick with the hum of tools and the faint tang of heated alloys. Max Williams stood hunched over a table cluttered with components, his expression a mix of intense focus and excitement. Beside him, Xiphion Tech deftly manipulated parts with her 4 arms, each hand performing a separate task in synchronized precision. It's robust, Xiphion said, her voice tinged with admiration as she attached the final actuator to the drone's digitigrade leg. Bulky, but... She paused, cocking her head as her lower arms tightened a bolt. Efficient. Max glanced up, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Bulky's part of the charm. It's supposed to look like it means business. The drone stood in the center of the room, its angular frame distinctly human in design. Its bipedal locomotion gave it an imposing presence, the digitigrade legs capped with deployable magnetic anchors ready to grip surfaces firmly. The arms were designed for strength, capable of lifting an Authiadan shield with ease, while a small flash array mounted on its shoulders promised to disorient attackers. As Xiphion connected the final power couplings, the drone's eyes flickered to life with a faint blue glow. It rose smoothly to a standing position, its movements precise and deliberate. Max and Xiphion exchanged a glance before stepping back to observe. Let's see what you've got, Max murmured, picking up a handheld controller. The drone took a tentative step forward, its servos whirring quietly. It reached for the Authiadan shield they had borrowed from the armory, lifting it with ease. The micro-shield embedded in its frame activated with a low hum, a faint shimmer of energy enveloping the unit. Not bad, Xiphion said, her lower arms crossed while the upper 2 tapped commands into her console. Max, however, frowned, his sharp eyes catching a subtle hitch in the drone's movements. Wait, he said, his tone thoughtful. Something's off. Xiphion turned to him, her 4 eyes narrowing. What is it? Max gestured toward the drone. The CPU. It's struggling to process everything autonomously. It's fine for basic movements, but if it's in a real combat situation, the delay could be disastrous. Before Xiphion could respond, Xiljian Tech stepped into the room, his imposing frame blocking the doorway. The older Xifion's eyes narrowed as he took in the drone. A flaw? He said, his tone sharp. Of course, there's a flaw. This entire design philosophy is flawed. Humans and their obsession with over-engineering. Wait, Max interrupted, holding up a hand. It's not a dead end. What if we make the drone obey a control unit instead of relying entirely on onboard processing? That way, an Authiadan could command and direct a whole formation of these things. Zildjian paused mid-rant, his mouth snapping shut as he considered the idea. Ziphian tilted her head, her upper hands resting on her hips while the lower ones tapped at her console. A control module, she mused. If we build it into an existing Altheadan shield, the drones could form up off the shield face like a guideline. They'd act in perfect synchronization with the warrior carrying the shield. Max grinned. Exactly. He was already reaching for his toolkit, his mind racing with ideas. Before anyone could say more, Ava's holographic form flickered into existence beside them. The AI's expression was a blend of excitement and exasperation. Her arms crossed. An intriguing solution, she said. But I can't help but notice you're bypassing the obvious choice of handing control to me. Max glanced at her, looking sheepish. Sorry, Ava. Your analysis in the field is already crucial for communications and tactical adjustments. Adding the management of multiple shield walls would strain even your processing power. Ava raised an eyebrow. Flattery won't earn your points, Max, but I concede the logic is sound. She turned to Shifian. Your input? Shifian nodded. Max is right. You already guiding the other drones aboard the ship. Diverting you resources to this project would be inefficient. Zildjian folded his arms, his expression unreadable. Madness, he muttered. Human engineering is madness, but, he exhaled sharply, his ears flicking in frustration. Report to me when the control unit is ready. I'll want to inspect it personally. As he turned and walked out, Max and Shifian exchanged a grin. Think we broke him? Max asked, his tone light. Shifian chuckled, her hands already busy assembling the prototype control module. He'll live. Let's see if we can make this work. Max nodded, his hands diving into the parts on the table. The workshop buzzed to life again as they set to work, the hum of creativity filling the air. The sparring chamber aboard the ISC Horizon hummed with subdued anticipation as Max adjusted the prototype control module affixed to Moeller's massive shield. The Altheadan warrior loomed over Max, his towering ursine form brimming with skepticism. His dark fur rippled as he shifted his weight, the faint hum of the powered shield in his hands a comforting reminder of its strength. Moeller glanced at the drone standing beside him, its angular frame eerily still. You're telling me this thing will fight alongside me as if it were my kin? Max straightened, wiping his hands on his jumpsuit. Not as if it were your kin. Think of it as an extension of yourself, a way to protect not just you, but everyone around you. Moeller's ears flicked, his skepticism unabated. Altheadan warriors do not abandon their shields, they are sacred to us, a symbol of our strength and honor. Max met Moeller's gaze, his tone soft but firm. It's not abandonment, it's evolution. He gestured toward the drone. With this system, your kin won't need to carry shields. They can wield heavier weapons, go on the offensive, and neutralize threats more effectively, all while staying true to your code of protecting the ship and its crew. Molar grunted, his amber eyes narrowing as he mulled over the human's words. Finally, he nodded. Very well, human. Show me what this evolution can do. Max allowed himself a small smile. Thank you, let's get started. Shifian, perched near a console, tapped a few commands to finalize the programming. The control module is ready, Max. It's linked to the drone's system. She looked at Moeller. You'll be able to determine its formation position and whether it mirrors your movements or reacts independently. Moeller shifted his grip on his shield, his claws clicking softly against the handle. And if it fails? Then we improve it, Max said with a shrug. But it won't fail. With everything set, they began the first test, formation mode. The drone stepped into position beside Moeller, its movements smooth and deliberate. At Max's nod, Moeller began moving across the chamber, his shield held at the ready. The drone matched his pace perfectly, keeping formation as they simulated various maneuvers. Moeller barked commands into the control module, testing its responsiveness. Tighten the line! Advance! Hold! Each order was met with precision, the drone shifting seamlessly to maintain cohesion. When the test concluded, Moeller nodded grudgingly. It holds formation well, better than I expected. Max grinned. Good. Let's move to the next test, mirror mode. In this mode, the drone was programmed to mimic Moeller's shield movements, every bash, shove, and parry. The Altheadan warrior stepped forward, executing a powerful shield bash against a stationary target. The drone mirrored the motion almost instantly, slamming its own shield into another target. Moeller repeated the action several times, each with increasing speed and complexity. Finally, he stepped back, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Its reaction time is slightly behind mine, about 1/50th of a second. Max nodded, jotting down notes on his datapad. We can tweak that. But for now, let's move to the final test, Guardian Mode. In Guardian Mode, the drone maintained its formation beside Moeller but responded independently to simulated threats. As the test began, small drones armed with non-lethal stunners darted into the chamber, targeting both Moeller and the prototype. The shield drone sprang into action, intercepting incoming stunner shots with its shield. When one of the attacking drones closed in, the shield drone delivered a powerful shove, knocking it off course. Moeller observed closely, occasionally testing the drone by feinting an attack or leaving an opening. The shield drone responded with surprising efficiency, covering gaps in his defense without overcommitting. When the test concluded, Moeller lowered his shield, his expression thoughtful. Its shield bashes and shoves are a bit too telegraphed, but it works better than I expected. Max let out a relieved breath. We'll fine-tune the movements, but overall? Moeller nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. It's promising. Perhaps there's merit in this evolution you speak of, human. Jifian let out a triumphant chirp. See? Even the stubborn warriors can't deny good engineering. Moeller shot her a mock glare before turning back to Max. You have my respect, human. For now. Max chuckled, extending a hand. I'll take it. As Moeller clasped Max's hand in a firm grip, Jifian leaned back in her chair, her lower arms crossed. I'd call this a success. Max smiled, his mind already racing with ideas for improvements. It's a start. Let's make it better. The sparring chamber buzzed with energy as the final preparations for the demonstration were completed. The 3 shield drones stood motionless in a perfect line, their angular frames gleaming under the lights. Moeller inspected the drones one last time, his hulking form casting a long shadow. Beside him, 3 Autiadans wielded heavier-than-standard weapons, their stances exuding quiet confidence. Across the chamber, Maruk and his hand-picked team of 3 larger Autiadans prepared for their task. Break through Moeller's formation and reach the designated line at the far end of the room. Maruk's expression was a mixture of determination and something close to amusement, his gaze flickering briefly toward Max on the sideline. Max stood with Malinar, Cabo, and the other officers, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. His jaw was set, but Malinar, standing just a bit closer than necessary, could sense the nervous energy radiating off him. You've done everything you can, Max, she said softly, her tone soothing. Now it's up to them. Max glanced at her, managing a small, uncertain smile. I know, it's just... I can't help feeling like this is a gamble. If it fails... It won't, Malinar interrupted, her voice firm. You've accounted for every variable. Trust in your work. Before Max could reply, Cabo's deep, rumbling voice cut through the air. Enough delays. Begin. At Cabo's command, the sparring chamber filled with the hum of power as the drones activated. Moeller barked an order into his control module, and the drones snapped into position beside him, their shields raised. Formation test. Begin! Ava's calm, disembodied voice announced, her humanoid hologram flickering into existence beside Max. Maruk and his team advanced immediately, their movements coordinated and deliberate. Moeller stood firm, his shield held high as the drones mirrored his every step and motion. When Maruk feinted to the right, Moeller shifted, and the drones followed seamlessly, blocking the opening. They're holding, Max muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Malinar shot him a quick glance, her expression softening. Of course they are. Maruk growled something to his team, and the opposition escalated. One of the larger Uthiadans lunged forward, attempting to break the line with brute force. Moeller sidestepped, the drones moving in perfect synchronization to counter the attack. The Uthiadan was pushed back, his shield struck by a powerful drone shove that sent him stumbling. Moeller's voice echoed across the chamber as he switched tactics. Mirror mode disengaged. Guardian mode active. The change was immediate. The drones no longer mimicked Moeller's movements but acted independently, reacting to threats with precision. One drone intercepted an incoming strike from Maruk himself, while another repositioned to block a flanking attempt. Then came the calculated move. Moeller opened a small gap in the formation, baiting one of Maruk's team members. The Uthayadon took the bait, charging through the gap, only to be subdued as the drones closed in around him, their shields pinning him in place. The match ended moments later, with Maruk signaling defeat. He stepped back, his breathing heavy, but there was a grudging respect in his eyes as he looked at Moeller and the drones. "Not bad," Maruk said, his tone almost reluctant. "They're effective." Max let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Cabo turned to Ava. "How many can we produce?" Ava's hologram flickered slightly, her voice crisp. "With current material stores, we can construct 12 units. However, the prototypes require further refinement. Factoring in adjustments, I estimate 7 additional units can be produced." Maruk folded his arms, nodding slowly. 7 more. That would give us 10 total, 5 for each of the 2 key choke points. That frees up 10 Autiadons for heavier weapons or counter-assault roles. Cabo stroked his chin, his expression contemplative. "A significant tactical advantage." He turned to Xifian and Zildjian. "Refine the design, reinforce the armor. We can't afford any weak points." Both engineers nodded, Xifian's lower arms already tapping out notes on her datapad. Finally, Cabo's gaze settled on Max. "You've done well, Max, but now it's time to prepare for your next assignment. The away mission is scheduled to begin shortly." Max straightened, a small but genuine smile forming on his face. "Thank you, Captain. And thank you for honoring my request to be included on away missions." Cabo's expression softened, his eyes briefly distant. "You've earned it. Now get ready." As Cabo turned back to the others, Malinar leaned closer to Max, her voice low. "See? I told you it wouldn't fail." Max chuckled softly, some of the tension easing from his shoulders. "You were right. Again." Malinar smiled, a faint blush coloring her features. "You'll get used to it." If you love engaging stories like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay updated with all the latest episodes from FY Stories.